So welcome everyone to Experiencing No Self session number 12. Excuse me. So I've, what did I call this one? Evoking the true heart and seeing unity. So we've been exploring this, and today we'll be exploring some practices along these lines. Before I begin, I just want to recognize that today is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So it's a day that we can kind of recognize and honor Indigenous survivors of residential schools. We can commemorate the children that were lost. And I think we can also kind of reflect on the legacy of trauma that continues to affect Indigenous peoples today. So as we're kind of practicing these heart practices, these, seeing interconnectedness and enlivening the true heart, we can see the trauma of Indigenous peoples as our trauma too. It's, and our reflections and actions can arise from that understanding. So it arises not from the egoic mind of, judgment and struggle, but rather from the transcendent mind and the true heart of love and openness. So I want to actually explore this kind of idea more next session. But today I want to stick with what we were planning and talking about practices. So I want to explore specific practices. I want to give you kind of several practices that you can engage with over the next 2 weeks, because I won't be available next week. So you'll have 2 weeks to engage in these practices. And I've really been engaging with them at a kind of heightened level, for the last several weeks, and kind of preparing for this, and just because that's what I do, pretty much do practices. It's the most important thing to me. So that's what I do. So last week we looked at evoking the true heart, and kind of awakening the true heart's capacity for perceiving the unity of existence. So it's perceiving that kind of oneness or interconnectedness, whatever words we might use to describe it. So we're really, it's a process of kind of awakening this latent capacity that's within us all. So we're not kind of creating something here. It's not like a practice where we have to conjure up, loving love or compassion or whatever it might be. We're simply awakening that which is already there, and we're awakening this capacity that's inherent in all of us, this perceptual capacity to sense unity, interconnectedness. So remember we spoke about in the past about how moving from being a somebody, so being an egoic self, so believing all our thoughts and struggling with what's happening in our lives, and that's kind of living, that's the life of a egoic mind, right? It's kind of this constant struggle and judging and suffering. There was the Buddha called it the wheel of samsara. So we moved from this kind of being a somebody to being a nobody, right? So experiencing no self, you kind of enter this sense of nothingness. And I mentioned I started there, because we see that we're not this egoic self, that this is not who we truly are. And I imagine that process for each of us is at kind of a different different level of unfolding, but just a process of continuously seeing how this egoic self creates pain, creates suffering in our lives. And you continuously see it, and it actually builds momentum. So it may seem like if you're at kind of the place where it's, it seems like a struggle, you kind of get caught up in your everyday life, and then every once in a while you might remember, oh, there's the egoic self creating suffering. What happens is the more you see it, the more it kind of builds momentum. It's kind of like a snowball coming down a hill, and eventually it gets so much momentum that you're just continuously seeing, oh, there's the egoic self. Oh, there's the egoic self. And it could even just be like flashes that arise. But we saw that we're nothing, and now we're going to the next kind of seeing that we're everything, right? Because if you get kind of left in that void of nothingness, it can be kind of, well, you feel kind of alone, right? Like you just kind of, it's not the full story. It's truer to say that we are everything. We are also nothing, but we are also simultaneously everything. So that's kind of what we're exploring. And I mentioned I'd like to start with the nothing, because if you start with the you are everything, then sometimes the egoic mind latches onto that and goes, oh, I like that. I'm going to identify with being everything. And so you can kind of make a nice ego project out of being everything. And so it can take some time to kind of work through that. And the ego will do this anyway, right? It's probably latched on to I am nothing, or, it latches on to any kind of identity that it can. It's what did one teacher call it? The ego's a shapeshifter. It'll shift into whatever to latch onto in terms of identity. So we're actually coming back into our humanness, right? We see that we're not this self, this illusory self. So that's where we kind of see, okay, so I'm a nobody in terms of not being this self. We kind of come around and see that we're everything. We come back to our humanness and to acting as humans in the world, but we do it with a much different knowing of reality. So it shifts completely how we act in the world, because it's coming from a different knowing. We know the truth of reality. So we see the truth of interconnectedness, right? And not as an idea. So it's not an idea or philosophy that we're believing. In fact, that's just more egoic belief structures being created. So it actually doesn't matter if you believe it or not at the level of belief. It's in fact, as we've said last week, it's incomprehensible to the mind. The way that everything, right, is the outcome of innumerable, untraceable influences is incomprehensible to the mind. So so in terms of practices, we can practice evoking the true heart, as I'm calling it, essential heart, big heart, spiritual heart. The names, labels don't really matter. It's more getting the felt sense of it, but we'll call it true heart. As a meditation, and I recommend that you do this as a meditation. In a similar way that we just did, you just simply drop down into the heart space, drop your head into your heart, you could say, leave the abstract level of thought into this, the space of the big heart. And so I recommend that you do the meditation practice, however long, kind of fits in for you in your life. This week I had 2 days where I didn't do my regular practice. So I'm putting pavers on the driveway and we needed to, and I left the car in the garage and the pavers got delivered. So I needed to get these pavers out onto the driveway as quick as I could so that we could get the car out of the garage. It's quite funny. The Vita says, you know that we can't drive the car when there's all these piles of rock. So yeah, it kind of happened. I guess I should have moved it, but I didn't. So we had to, so the long and short of the story is I had to put these pavers down. So I just basically got up and, really I get up pretty early and started and worked for 2 days. So I didn't do my meditation, regular meditation, formal meditation, I guess you could say. The whole paving experience was actually kind of a meditation. But it's, so I took 2 days off, and what I noticed was that the just from that little time off of formal practice, the egoic mind was a little more, it acted out more. This is actually a line I got from Jason in conversation. The ego acts out every once in a while. And it's what it just felt like. The ego was just kind of acting out more. And isn't that interesting? And so it happened the first day, and then the second day, it was even kind of more intense. And I thought, oh, that's interesting that just taking a day off meditation, that and the heart felt a little less expansive as well. So then I went back, finished the driveway enough to drive on, went back and to the practice and just saw this shift back again. And I've been doing this for a long time, and you wouldn't think I'd still be kind of surprised by this, but I was kind of surprised that would cause a shift in my day. And it doesn't even have to be a long formal practice. So I guess I'm sharing this just to emphasize the importance of that kind of formal meditation practice. And I still recommend the morning. I just think it sets you up for the day. But I guess we're all wired a little different. If you find it works for you in the evening, then I'm sure that's fine as well. So that's kind of the heart practice in terms of a meditation. And there was last week's, I believe I put that on the website, and I'll endeavor to put this one on the website as well, so that if you want to do it guided, you have a couple of guided, because these aren't really meditations that you'll find out there on the web. They're kind of specific in that regard. But what's also wonderful about this practice, and this is really what I'm going to share with you today, is how we can practice this during the day anytime. Anytime. There's lots of moments. Any moment is a moment for you can practice. So you could be waiting in a line. You could be waiting for someone. You could just be sitting there with nothing to do. You can bring attention to the true heart. It's so simple, and you don't really need to complicate it any more than that. Just draw your attention, redirect your attention to the space of the true heart, from the head area into the chest area. You're kind of dropping your head into your heart. So I found this to be kind of a special practice, and it really enlivened the big heart, just kind of when I'm going about my day, interacting with people. I find I engage in a more heartfelt way. In fact, we can do this right now, right? On Zoom, we're all 9 of us, these little boxes on the screen. So we can meet it together in this way, in a heartfelt way. So we can really come together and pay attention to what is often ignored, our true heart. So it's a dimension of our being that often goes unacknowledged and unappreciated. So as we look at each other on the screen, we can see each of our presences. So it can be kind of a meeting of the hearts, not of ideas and beliefs. It's not a meeting of ideas, not even spiritual ideas. It's a meeting of hearts. So we can kind of just to start just by acknowledging that quiet space in our dimension of our being that's often forgotten. So this, in a way, this is how we meet in this kind of a group. We meet in in the spaces between the words, and not just the words that I'm saying, but between the words that are going on in your head, right? Because there's probably more talking that's not coming out of my mouth that goes on, right? So you meet in this space between all the words, the flurry of words, and we can connect at this level. You can really connect at this level. I don't know, just to give you a feel for it, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of, being with someone that's going through an intense crisis, like a life-threatening medical situation. They're often connecting from their true heart, like their heart's wide open. They feel like they're facing the possibility of death, right? So lots of egoic structures just naturally fall away, right? And the true heart is what's available, and they can meet from that place. So you can actually do that anytime. That true heart is always there. It's just so often veiled. It's covered over. It's not acknowledged. Okay, so we can do that right as we meet here. In this meeting from this place of the true heart really has the capacity to free us from the narrative of the mind. Right, just coming back down, dropping from the head into the heart, dropping from the head into the heart. As I look at the suffering in the world, look at as you reflect on the legacy of the residential schools and the trauma that caused, you really see how important it is for humanity, to drop from their heads into their hearts more and more. And this is what we're evoking here, as I said at the beginning, is a perceptual capacity that lies dormant. We're evoking a perceptual capacity to see unity, to see interconnectedness. So that's what we're really doing here, is we're just evoking this, that we're naturally one, and we're seeing it. We don't see it from being in the head. We see it from dropping down into what I'm calling the true heart. So it gives you access to this kind of intuitive capacity to perceive unity and just a total intimate connection with all of life, all of existence. You're this accessing this dormant capacity. As I said, it's always there. We just veil it over, cover it over, and we're just kind of evoking it. You could say we're kind of bringing it online to so that it can perceive how it naturally perceives unity. So I've got three. I better get on to the practices. 3 practices. I hope this isn't too many, but I tend to try to offer too much sometimes. So if it is, maybe stop me at some point and go, maybe that's a bit much, but I've got 3 here. So one is just what we've been talking about. I'm going to say a little more about dropping our head into our heart. And I'm going to frame it in terms of offering attention to the true heart as a gift. So you're offering your attention to the true heart as a gift, as opposed to the egoic self wanting something from it. It's simply a gift of your time and attention. So I talked a bit about how many of us hold a lot of emotional pain in our hearts, in our human hearts. And we try to go through our lives trying to process this and deal with it in different ways. This practice isn't about dealing with that emotional pain that we all have, right? Down to the level of trauma. It's actually not, so we're not dealing, there's other practices that can help us deal with that. But what we're doing here is we're seeing the difference between the vulnerability of the human heart and the strength and kind of courage of the big heart. And the big heart can hold all of that, human emotional pain. And I'll just point out too that so abiding in the big heart is not about having a special experience or blissful experience. And such things can happen, but they're not the focus. And I hope for your sake that they don't happen to you, because what happens is you get those kinds of big spiritual experiences, and then we kind of latch onto them and we want to have them again, right? Because they feel good. And so we can go down some real spiritual side roads, so to speak, get lost on back roads, having blissful experiences. But that's not the focus of this practice either. So we do enter this kind of practice with self compassion, treating yourself as you would a beloved friend. And just again to say that the true heart is quiet and still. So it's easy to miss. So if you're looking for something big and powerful, some people do actually experience the big heart as big and powerful. I won't say that never happens, but from what I've seen from most, it's very quiet and still. So, just kind of bring that gentle attention to it. So to feel into the true heart, you simply drop your attention down from the head into the heart area. It's like kind of resting attention. And I like the word resting. It's just resting attention there in that area. So it's, notice if the ego is grasping or desiring something to happen. Like I'll rest my attention in the true heart, and I want, X or Y to happen. I want to feel a certain way. I want a certain thing to go away. These are all struggles of the egoic mind, right? Wanting some things and not wanting other things. So just noticing if that's coming up, and just coming back to the simple offer of your time and attention to the true heart, as if you are offering a meaningful gift to your friend. So I put it that way as because the notion of offering your attention can take us out of this idea of the egoic mind wanting something out of it. It's just you. It's kind of a humble offering of your attention to the true heart, rather than you trying to achieve anything. So that's really kind of an important attitude to bring to this practice. And the idea of a gift really resonates for me, a meaningful, precious, humble offering of my attention to the true heart. So as attention kind of drops this way, you feel kind of a gentle quiet, perhaps a sense of presence that arises. And I mentioned before, you can feel like, your chest actually opening in a physical sense, the breastbone kind of opening, or it can feel like a shroud or a covering or a veil coming off of the heart space, like a physical kind of sense of that, or it can feel like light or sun rays emanating. There's all different ways that that people feel into this, but you just kind of feel into that sense of the heart, and then you kind of look around and notice how the true heart perceives what is present. It's really interesting. So, as you're going through the day, just rest in that area, and then you don't even engage with somebody, or you can just look. I did this, I don't know, I could probably say hundreds of times over the last couple of weeks. And each time it's this sense of like, I could be just standing on a corner, and then I would notice the clouds and the trees, and I would just sense into the beauty and interconnectedness of all of this. We're in a forest, just seeing all these unique trees. So just anyway, just kind of sense into that area, and then look around and see if you experience things differently. Notice how the true heart perceives what's present. You're really kind of seeing, you're observing unfolding through the eyes of the presence of the true heart. Just going to do that as many times as you can through the day. And so you're just kind of resting in that quiet presence of the true heart, rather than the noisy demands of the egoic mind. Remember that you won't do it perfectly. Don't look for some big experiences. Don't look for, I've given you some pointers in terms of what, I sensed and felt, but don't look or expect for that to happen. Just kind of rest there. And really what matters, it's not what happens, it's more the sincerity of the gift of your attention that matters. So that's the kind of the practice you can do anytime. And again, don't worry about doing it perfectly. There's no actual right or wrong way to do it. It's just, you're just drawing attention to something that's already there, always and already present within you. So practice 2 is engaging all the senses simultaneously. So this is an interesting one. We tend to engage each sense. So you see something, or then you smell something, and you hear something, and we tend to bounce right from sense to sense. And this one's inviting you to look upon the world and engage with whatever's in front of you through all your senses simultaneously. And what this does is it evokes the true heart. You may notice as you do it that your senses become more alive and vibrant because you're actually feeding each sense with the other sense. I don't know if I should use wine as an example, but if you if you have a nice bottle of red wine, and sometimes people, that's when they engage all their senses, right? It's it's a beautiful. So you're looking at the label, and then you open it, and the simultaneously the fragrance, the smell and whatever hits you, and then you actually feel saliva, so you sense that, and it's kind of a total body experience, right? It doesn't have to be wine. It can be anything. It could be chocolate cake. I have that experience with chocolate cake, I have to admit. But so but you probably have something where it just it engages all your senses. So it's just kind of bringing that into your into a way of being with life in general. So you may notice things are just kind of more vibrant, more alive, and you might experience a deeper connection with life, with what's present around you. And this is simply the true heart being evoked. It's a sense of aliveness, presence, coherence, experience of things as a whole, the wholeness of experience. Some of those words kind of paint a picture for you. You're feeling, engaging with all your senses simultaneously. For some of us, this actually comes quite natural, and for others, it's not. It's kind of almost a trait that some people. There's a thing called synesthesia. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Synesthesia. Have people heard of that? Where it's actually a thing that people have where they're able to engage. There's multiple senses. A lot of musicians have it. Beyonce and Billie Eilish, for example, are known synesthetists. I'm not saying that right. Synesthetists. They're known to have this ability to engage so they can maybe see music or smell music, or see colors of music. So they're totally engaged. All their senses are engaged in certain ways, working as a coherent whole. So in the moment that you're doing this, you're in absolute intimacy with what's around you, right? And really, that's what this is, absolute intimacy with the 10,000 things. Remember that Dogen quote? And I love that quote. It's the absolute intimacy with everything. So this is a way to experience that as a practice, at a very real level. So find that thing that kind of where you do that naturally, and then try to expand that out into your everyday life. So for me, it was wine and chocolate cake, and then that kind of expanded out. Not so much wine these days, but back in the day, that was a thing. So that's so find what kind of engages you in that way, and then bring that out into to function that way in the world. And then the last one, so that's not too much. You've got kind of two. One is dropping the head into the heart as a gift, And I really think of that notion of the gift. The other is engaging all the senses. So taking that and bringing it into to all your engagement with the world. And the other I'm calling pulling back the veil, covering the true heart. So the true heart is already and always there. It's just unacknowledged, often overlooked in human beings. And that's because it's veiled over. Sometimes it's veiled over because there's so much emotional pain that we don't go towards the heart space, right? Yeah. So one practice is when you walk towards someone, another person, particularly someone you don't know, right? Just a random person. Imagine that your heart is wide open, your chest is wide open. So you're literally removing the veil that's covering your heart. You're removing a kind of energetic veil through your imagination, but you're removing an energetic veil that's covering your heart. That's there, and it's can be there without you even knowing it. So we're removing this energetic veil, this covering. As you walk past the person, feel into the sense of pulling back this veil from your heart. And see what you feel. See if there is a different feeling that arises. You may notice something different. The person may just seem different to you. It may seem a little different. No, when I connect, things are just a little bit different. This gives you kind of a foretaste or a beginning to experience this being connected in a more intimate way. So you can do it, just with anybody you're passing on the street. So we're sensing into this intuitive capacity, because the heart is a perceptual. The big heart, the true heart, is a perceptual center, not just an emotional center. So you're just bringing something online that's highly intuitive and has the capacity to perceive this interconnectedness, that we are everything. And as you start to engage with the heart in this way, you start to see things and people, the world, differently. You may notice that when you're resting in that place, you're below the conceptual mind of that's conceptualizing a self. Right? You're resting in that area, and when the egoic mind starts to imagine itself into existence, it becomes very obvious, because you've left one place in your body and gone into another. So it becomes very obvious when you start to re-self. I don't know if that's to re-self, to recreate this, to conceptualize, to think yourself back into existence as a self. So we can really see that clearly, because it's a shift and it's abrupt. Whereas if you're living in the mind, and the conceptualizing mind, it just goes on. We can continually recreate the idea of ourselves without really being aware of it. And we also start to realize that the border of our being is not demarcated by our skin. I think we did a meditation where we conceived of our, the physical form doesn't end with the demarcation of our skin. It goes beyond the skin. So, I mean, whatever we call consciousness, awareness, Buddha nature, God, whatever we might want to call it, it's not localized in the mind and the body. It's beyond that. So that's what we're really sensing into that. So those are some practices, and I'll just open it up if people have any questions about those or about anything else that's coming up in their practice. Yeah, Luana. Yeah.
Hello, Stephen. Hello, everyone. Not quite sure how to word this, but as you're talking about the first practice of dropping the head to the heart, I do a lot of visualization and, guided meditations and things like that. So I think as you're talking about it, my mind goes, okay, it's peaceful, it's sunny, and I guess I'm trying hard to, it gets probably ego trying to figure out, am I really dropping into the heart, or is it a visual of what I think dropping the heart feels like? Just like you said about, well, this is how you experience it. You experience it as blissful and things like that. Is there, I suppose, a knowing when you have dropped into the heart, or is there a perception that you know? How do I know when I've dropped into my heart? I guess is my question, my final question. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So keep it simple, I would say. So it's simply resting attention in the heart space. That's the practice. And if you get drawn back up into the head space and thoughts into the narrative of the mind, simply redirect attention, and that offering is a gift. So I wouldn't really go looking for a kind of experience. It's because it's not an experience. So I use words like presence and quiet, still presence to kind of as pointers, right? And there is a sense of that stillness, right? Because it's not noisy like the mind. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of contrast it to the mind is moving. It's vibrating. There's noise. There's narrative. It's got a stillness to it. In terms of visualizing, I wouldn't make it a practice where you're visualizing sunshine in your heart or doing things like that. I think it probably unnecessarily overcomplicates it. Mm-hmm. And so I would just say keep it as a really simple practice. I would just do that very simple thing, and then look around and see how you feel into like how you feel in relation to what's around you. And again, don't even look for how you should feel. I say, you should, what I noticed, but I've been doing this a long time, and I did it, like I said, hundreds of times over the last couple of weeks. And so it's just this, it kind of builds momentum, but don't look for anything special to happen. It would be how I would put it. Again, keep it simple. because the ego will obviously want something special, right? When you said blissful, well, I said, I hope you don't get these big spiritual special experiences, because the ego will latch on to those and will take you down spiritual cul-de-sacs in the back roads, and for, you could add a year or two here to your journey, because you'll be driving around lost on back roads. So yeah, but that it often happens, and the ego, oh wow, I love that bliss thing. I went through a whole retreat once wanting to recreate, a blissful experience I had just before I went, and I didn't realize it till about, I guess it was 5 or 6 days in, that I'm just suffering because I'm wanting this craving mind is what has taken over my practice. But it was a big aha moment to see that, wow, that one little simple thing created this much suffering. And so, we go through what we go through, right? And it's all part of, what unfolds. But those would be kind of some pointers I could offer you.
Thank you so much.
Stephen, just following up on that, getting a sense of what it means to drop into the heart. I was sort of puzzling over that a bit too. Earlier on in the talk, you were mentioning sense of interconnectedness and unity. So what I was doing in the practice as I was dropping sort of out of my mind was just trying to sense into that interconnectedness and unity, which seemed to immediately bring up a little bit of feelings of compassion and love. Is it a mistake to try and sense into it in that way? Is that too confining and narrow, or is that okay?
Yeah. Well, you evoked love and compassion, so yeah, yeah. I don't want to I wouldn't want to get into too much of a discussion about right ways and wrong ways, except to say keep it simple. It's the true heart's innate capacity to perceive unity, right? So it's not something that the mind conjures up, like you have to imagine interconnection or imagine love or imagine anything. It's just by resting there, you unveil the true heart, or you bring online the true heart's capacity to naturally perceive interconnectedness, which is naturally loving and compassionate, right? Because we're seeing it all as the same. So you love your hand, the tree, Judas' arm, Nick's leg, Genesis, whatever, just on and on and on. It's all the same. You wouldn't harm any of that any more than anything else. So it just kind of naturally comes online. So yeah, I would say keep it simple and avoid any kind of trying to imagine interconnection. True heart will naturally perceive that. It might take some time to just kind of get a feel for it, just resting there. Yeah, it might take some. It'd be kind of an ideal practice for a retreat, to just kind of to do this over an extended period of time, and in a retreat format. If you're, especially if it seems newer as a practice, because often we practice, we do loving kindness meditation, we just we voice these phrases of may you be happy, may you be well, may you be may I be happy, may I be well, may all beings be happy, well, free from mental and physical suffering, and so on. And you're people think that, well, that's kind of what we need to do to cultivate loving kindness. Well, this is quite different. This is just it's your true nature. I mean, loving kindness meditation inclines us towards our true nature, but this way we're just simply letting our true nature flower, right? It's there. One way is to incline the mind towards it. Another way is to sense into its center. And that area of the body is the place where it physically resonates the strongest. So, I mean, it resonates in the entire body, but that's why I kind of start with the entire body. I've had people say, well, you know, the sense of the true heart, it feels more to me like it's a little lower. It's kind of down just above my abdomen. Well, that, you know, so it can be different. One person told me their hands are where they really feel the connection, and, you know, the touch of their hands or their feet on. So it can be different, but by and large, it resonates in the chest area. But you might feel it through your whole body as well.
I just when you said this practice, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the meditation of when you're trying to kind of drop into just a general awareness, like a choiceless awareness. I mean, it's different, but I mean, for me, because when with that meditation in the past, I feel like, you know, I'm trying to like, it's almost like I'm striving to go towards this goal of choiceless awareness, and that but I didn't realize I was doing that. And as soon as I realized there was a striving element, you know, I was able to recognize that and say, oh, this is striving. I'm striving, which is kind of craving this state of general awareness with choiceless awareness. And then, of course, I'd be like, oh, how come you were doing that? And then I have like this aversion towards striving. So it's this back and forth between craving and aversion.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'd recognize the aversion towards the striving. And I would think like, okay, well, you know what? Like, I mean, I'll invite in non-craving. I'll invite in some non-striving, and it's kind of able to get into this kind of middle way of like, kind of like on this kind of like, feels like I'm almost like just on this like very narrow, walking on a razor's edge, but it's like the right kind of balance, you know? And I mean, it's not me doing it, but it's kind of, you know, just being able to recognize those two things going on. Then then my mind just kind of was there, you know, kind of just be there, but not being super active and trying to analyze what I'm doing. And then kind of just being able to get this get this sense of this general awareness, this choiceless awareness. And I'm feeling like I could, you know, with any of these things, and it's an issue for me is striving, for sure, like striving towards getting this feeling of heart, you know, this true heart feeling. So I'm wondering if you had any maybe some pointers about how to manage striving in like these kinds of practices where you're actually, you know, trying to, maybe you have a certain, like, it's almost, there's a concept, but it's not really a concept. It's just more of a felt sense. But like you are, you know, there is a certain, I guess, element you're trying to fall into, or you're trying to, I guess, discover or invoke.
Yeah, I like to use the word evoke because it points to or enliven. So you evoke, enliven, abide, right? And so it's something that's already there. You're not creating it, you're resting. So you evoke something by resting, by giving the gift of your attention to this, simply this place in the body. You're evoking something that's already there, something that's covered over for various reasons. So that's the language I use on purpose to avoid planting, like striving kinds of phrases, like, creating, manufacturing, producing. Because when we start to do that, all we're doing is interfering with what is. All these practices, ultimately are practices about just being present with what is. Wanting it to be any different. Like you're just, life's unfolding. It's okay. You're just with what is. If you're enlightened, you wouldn't care if your car got towed. Right? If you're truly with whatever's unfolding, you wouldn't care if your car got towed. Just go, oh, my car got towed. Yeah. In terms of choiceless awareness, it's a useful practice, but and we did whole sessions on it, and so it's not like I excuse me, I don't see the value in it. It's got very valuable practice, but we're still in a way interfering with life unfolding, right? We're doing something, we want to change it in some way. And of course, when you start to do that, the ego wants results from it, right? As soon as you start interfering with what is arising in the present moment, the ego wants something out of it. Well, why? Because it should expect something out of it, because it's involved now, right? Why would you interfere with the present moment unless you think you're going to get something out of it? Who thinks they're going to get something out of it? The ego itself, right? And that's where striving comes in. You can bring this to the heart practice. Okay, I'm going to bring my attention. Steve used words like bliss and sun and all these nice sounding words. So we'll do this for a couple of days and see if I get that. And if not, I'll read a book by somebody so-and-so and see if what they say gets me there, right? That's the ego. I just see it. That's what the ego does. It's its game. It'll do it every time. You just like, oh, wow, there's that. Isn't that interesting? The ego is trying to get involved again. And that's about all you can do is just notice, there it is. It's not like it even has to stop, right? It just doesn't even have, the ego you just don't have to believe. A thought's not a problem unless it's a believed thought. Right? They're the only thoughts that cause suffering. You can have all kinds of, wild and wacky thoughts. Right? They can, and you know what? And the more you kind of go, oh, there's just a thought, and it doesn't become a believed thought. Of course, the less the mind secretes them. Why bother secreting a thought? This frickin' being